Oh, well, hello everybody. Whenever you're watching this is the instant match reaction. Leeds United have lost 2-0 to relegation rivals Burnley in a contextual period where you were playing sort of three teams, I believe, at the start of proceedings today. Of the five, it might have been below Leeds United in the league, of which we came off the back of Bournemouth, of Tottenham, and you're looking at it and you're thinking, right, okay, we're going into a period of games now where really sort of minimum points, maybe you're looking at four out the next six, really, when it comes to our UFC. Reason behind that, you look at the games that we've got coming up after that. You've got Nottingham Forest, of which now will have that new manager impact, whoever that may be. Probably will be Sean Dyche, of which we know what Sean Dyche is going to bring to this Premier League calendar, this Premier League campaign, I should say. It's not going to be an overarching display of wonderful football, but it will be dig in and get results, presumably, and know at least how to defend your box, of which Leeds struggled to do today. And then obviously you've got Brighton and Hove Albion, which will be it's eternally difficult game for anybody, really, with the progression and the upward trajectory that that football club seem to have. And then you kind of getting into a period of, when it comes to Leeds, where it gets into some really tricky waters. And that's why kind of the context of it today was must win. It was because we were playing a team who a lot of us would see as being lesser than Leeds United. A team of which is below Leeds, was 4 points behind Leeds, had a worse goal difference than Leeds, and of which many people, including myself, would have had below Leeds at the start of the season. So when I was talking about Leeds getting 10 wins and was talking about Leeds getting 10 wins throughout the week, I was looking at Burnley. Burnley at home, Burnley away. Sunderland home, Sunderland away, albeit that's looking quite tricky now, isn't it, with them winning again and on 14 points. So I was saying that I believe this was a must-win for Leeds United, because you've got to look at certain games in the football calendar, and Farker and his team will have done this. This will have been one of them. Now, what did we see from Leeds today? Well, I have to say I thought duels and battles were lost. I thought the midfield completely was gobbled up by Ugachukwu and Florentino Luis. If you guys hark back to the beginning of the transfer window, Ugachukwu was on my 7 picks list for Leeds United. Obviously, them getting him on loan, I believe it might be a permanent. I'm not 100% sure. And Leeds' midfield, I thought, was completely pressed today. And I thought they had a little bit more mobility in there, a little bit more ability to move the ball quicker. And I thought there was a little bit of a variance in terms of their midfield play from that long ball out wide, which we saw a lot of in the first half from Burnley, basically trying to turn Leeds around, of which you don't really see from Leeds United. Leeds United are almost wary of that long ball. They like to play the ball. I always say this, when a 5 to 7 yard space, that's what they do, and we methodically move across the pitch. The problem is then the opposition is able to do that with you. They're able to move into their framework, get a little bit more solidified in that sort of structure, because you enable them to do that, because you're not pulling them out of position with long-range balls, which Daniel Farker definitely doesn't press his side to do. So you're at a point of which that midfield, I felt in that first half, was getting gobbled up. I thought Ugachukwu was the best player on the pitch. And Leeds, I didn't think looked that aggressive. I didn't think we looked... it looked like that Leeds team today hadn't played with each other before, which, I think the strength of Leeds this season has been the cohesiveness. I think it's been the unit and how strong we've been. I thought today it was a lackluster performance, of which I thought, and it was, I have to say, it was epitomised really by their first goal, the ball into the box, of which there was a mistake by Caldalo, of which obviously then Burnley had the throw in. And then it was a 2v1 situation out wide for whatever reason, I don't know. And the ball was put into the box for a 6'3", 6'4" Ugachukwu to be stood on his own. And he couldn't miss. Great ball in from Kyle Walker. No engagement, not quickly going out to Kyle Walker and closing him down. Jack Harrison was the closest man to him, who I thought was scared of Kyle Walker for the entire game in terms of trying to take him on 1v1. Didn't happen with Jack. There was a couple of times that first half where he's isolated up against Kyle Walker. He'd basically come inside because he didn't want to at least even try and take him on. At least Gabby was trying to hit that byline. Jack was fearful of it. And we know he's a confidence player, but it felt like that again. Jack was scared at taking his man on. It felt like Walker was in his head from moment one today. So he was cutting inside a lot, and then that made Leeds a lot more compact. And then Cullen and Ugachukwu, and it felt like the other man in the midfield they had, of which his name has escaped me, just had the running of it in there. Florentino Luis, who I thought was good today as well. I thought Longstaff was poor, really poor today. I thought his first touch was like a trampoline first touch, really, for the majority of time he had on the ball. I thought he really narrowed his spacing with his first touch. I thought as well it was a get out of free jail card for Stack and Longstaff today to just go backwards. And I don't know why that is. You're up against Burnley with the greatest of respect. You're up against the midfield, of which, let's be honest, guys, when we're looking at this, we can have a little bit of a threadbare squad, can't we? We can have a little bit of a threadbare squad. You go up against Brighton with that squad, or even Nottingham Forest, and you're worrying. You go up against Burnley with the greatest of respect with that squad, and you're still probably thinking you might be able to get something, which we all were. We're still going into that game with Harrison and Aronson potentially starting. And let's be honest, we're all still going into it thinking, yeah, we'll be able to nick something here. Against any other Premier League side, including Sunderland, you wouldn't be thinking that, because of the injuries that we had when it comes to Nonto, when it comes to Okafor, in that front line. You're not able to really do anything there. I think there's no pace, there's no ability to really hit that byline. And we know with Harrison and Aronson that they are just abject in the final third. Now, for me, in that game, and it was once again epitomised, and it was symbolic, I thought, of Leeds' endeavour and we just didn't look up for it today. I thought we were half asleep from the starting whistle, really. I thought Burnley looked like they wanted it more in phases, and it was epitomised, I've said, by that first goal. The willingness to get out to Kyle Walker, to prevent that cross coming in, the willingness to be all over Ugachukwu, all over him in the box. You're not getting that ball, all over him, and he stood there by himself to knock the ball into the box. And yet, on the bench, we've got the best headed clearer of the ball in Europe last year in Jakobiel. Now, hindsight's 2020, isn't it? We can all say that right now. But I think there was an adaptability strand that Daniel Farke could have gone into this game with. You've got no width, which we haven't got, absolutely no width. How can we work around that? What can we do? What can I do as a manager to methodically work around that? And we've seen that even last season with the likes of Thomas Frank in a Brentford system, of which they've not got the best starting 11 in comparison to even those in and around the bottom. But you adapt, okay? Now, for me, when you've got the players available, we all said, didn't we? We all said, when you've got the players available, which we have when it comes to centre-backs, you've got Jakobiel, brilliant on international duty. The Slovenia manager said that he can't believe he's not getting to the Leeds side. Okay. Once again, hindsight 2020. But when you've got no width, you haven't got Dan James, haven't got no Okafor, haven't got Willian Yonso, you've got to adapt. So what can we do? What can we do? Could we go to a back three and then push Gabby Goodmanson and Jayden Bogle further up the pitch, and they can almost act as wingers, which they do anyway for Leeds. They're brilliant at going forward. Really, really good at going forward. So then you've got a centre back covering each side. You've got an additional centre back covering. So a lot of people think it's a lot more defensive. They think, oh, it's a back five. It's not. You can work it as a back three. You have two of the midfielders, maybe Tanaka just in that pocket, just in behind the front two. That could be Peru. It could be DCL. We saw in the Spurs game, and this, once again, context, it's against Burnley with the greatest of respect. So it's not against your Brightons, your Forest, whoever it might be, Palace, whatever we've got in the future coming up. So you can do that, and then you can have Metra up top. You can have DCL working off each other. You can have Peru just off Metra or DCL. So there's ways around it. There's ways around this. This is what I'm saying as well when it comes to the gaffer. Look, if it wasn't up against Burnley and if it wasn't up against their caliber of player, which I feel kind of matches up against, even with the players that we've got out, you can take the responsibility away from Daniel Farke. The players on the pitch are obviously responsible for their finishing as well. Daniel Farke can't control that. Daniel Farke cannot control Brendan Aronson having a 1v1 and all of Turf Moor to take a touch and put the ball in the back of the net. Brendan Aronson side foots because he's lack of confidence, because you just lace that, don't you? You lace that into the bottom corner, side foots it into Dubravka centrally, doesn't make Dubravka really do anything. It goes under Dubravka. So Aronson actually gets quite fortuitous in the respect that it hits the post. So it looks like he's done quite well with the chance. Got to score. Jack Harrison, second half. Ball comes over, hits it into the ground. He's got to at least work the keeper, But they're the half chances we had in the game, A header over the bar from Metcha towards the end should have scored, let's be honest. But what I like with Metcha is that he came on, two headed opportunities, two decent chances within sort of a 12 to 13 minute spark, you know? Tanaka comes on in the 81st minute. You've just got to bring him on before that. You've got to notice for me as a manager, that this isn't working. And we never see halftime subs, do we? So it's not working. Can we be a bit adaptable? Can we go to a back three, but not collapse into a back five? Push Goodmanson and Bogle further on, because even in the first half, Aronson and Harrison really were just decoys for the wingers anyway, for the fullbacks anyway. And that might have been a tactic. I don't think it was a tactic. It didn't look like one anyway. But Goodmanson and Bogle, half the time, were just getting forward and thought, look, we'll take it upon ourselves to get forward and hit that byline. And just the usefulness of Harrison and Aronson, you could see it. I could see it in the first half. And I just think this is where the adaptability of the manager will always come into question for me. Because you've had, look, I know injuries have happened. I completely get that injuries have happened. I'm going to make a comment about the board in a second as well, because I know a lot of you will be doing the Farker in, Farker out, board in, board out thing. And this isn't what it is. We're talking about the game in particular and what he could have done. But, you know, you're kind of looking at a scenario there where before the game, you can adapt, you can be a little bit unpredictable. Burnley were probably predicting a 4-3-3 today. That's what they got. We all knew it would be Aronson and Harrison. That's what they got. We all knew it as well. So that immediately makes Leeds a little bit weaker. It means that we really have to get a goal centrally, because those two aren't going to provide it. They're not going to provide any width and quality and production out wide. So we have to get a goal centrally. So then you're not playing the long ball, though. So we're not playing the long ball, you're not playing the ball. And you're not getting the second, third, and fourth balls in and around Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And we're barely playing the ball to Dominic Calvert-Lewin as well. And when we do, as I said, there's no one in and around him. So it's causing massive problems there anyway. And I felt like Leeds United were excellent in possession, and you'll see there 69%. I'm sure that was through the whole game, but weren't able to conjure anything really. Out wide, you're hitting the first man every time. Esteve had a great day today. Just ball into him straight away. We barely got beyond that first man. When it came to ball into the boxes and the ball into the box. And sometimes I just wonder what on earth. And look, it was very championship today. It almost felt like Leeds have to have 54 chances to score one, but you're not going to get that in the Premier League. You're just not going to get that. And I felt like if it wasn't up against Burnley, I'd say Farker was unlucky today when it came to squad selection. But because of the options that he's got off the bench, which he has today, there are options that can do damage to a Burnley side. Starting in a different sort of way, of which, is maybe a little bit of pragmatism when it comes to a system. This is why I can't come in here and just go, the board, because I'm seeing similar things with Daniel Farker against a Scott Parker side again, similar to what we saw with Southampton and Russell Martin. It's a similar things. That Leeds haven't scored against Burnley in 3 games. And every game appears to have been the exact same. Is that Burnley being good at what they're good at, or is it Leeds not being able to adapt to that Burnley side? I'd probably look at the latter. So with the amount of injuries we had today, it wasn't ideal. And can Daniel Farker control the misses today? Of course he can. But he can control who he brings on the pitch to dictate proceedings. I think Al Tanaka coming on earlier, I would have started him. I've said this in my pre-match. But if he was to come on in the 45th minute, I feel Leeds maybe would have had a little bit of enhanced production. I feel like, why did we need to wait 15 minutes to make changes with Metcha and James when it was obvious at halftime it wasn't changing? Why don't we do it 15 minutes earlier? And let me just bring it back to the board, because the thing is with the board, it's a very general thing, isn't it? Look, I 100% understand what the majority of Leeds fans are going to say in it. It's the board's fault. They've not brought in players, yada, yada, yada. Completely agree. But as I'll say again, with Peru on the bench, Metro on the bench, James on the bench, Tanaka on the bench, Biol on the bench, I feel against Burnley, Daniel Farker could have done things to impact proceedings today, personally, in game and prior. That's what I feel. So that's why I'm not really looking at the board in this game. Okay. But what I will look at overall is it's slightly frustrating when you see Matteo Joseph scoring 2 goals away at Sevilla today. Really good finishes. That's annoying, of course, because we're struggling when it comes to that attacking output. And I'm just saying that as a generalized point, by the way. I'm not saying, it's Joseph this, Joseph that. I'm not saying that, but it's annoying when that happens, especially when we're worrying up front a little bit. And that's not me to say, because the context will be taken now. Oh, Connor wants Joseph back in the starting 11. I don't. I'm just saying it's annoying seeing that prior to the game. And obviously he's not scoring a goal. But I think overall there is a lack of potency in Leeds' forward line. We know that. We're still getting half chances in the box against Burnley. We can't finish our dinner. And we've seen that against Bournemouth, haven't we? We've seen that against Spurs. We've seen that against Newcastle. We've seen this in games this season where Leeds United are just struggling to finish. The chances, we're snatching at them. We're not composed. There's not a level of assurance when you're in the box. I don't think Daniel Farke knows his best 11. That's a problem for me. That is a problem for me if the manager doesn't know his starting 11. You know, I think when you're also looking at a scenario where you've got Jack Harrison and Brendan Aronson starting for Leeds United in 2025, it's. I mean, I would literally take championship wingers. Championship wingers. I used to say to you guys all the time, Jack Harrison in the championship was our fifth winger. I don't pull back on that. He was our fifth winger. Brendan Aronson isn't even a winger. Brendan Aronson, for me, shouldn't even be starting for Leeds in the Premier League. There's a conversation of Brendan Aronson having to be moved on in the summer. Obviously, it's difficult when you've got no suitors, but in terms of a caliber quality wise, they cannot be starting for Leeds United. And that's why I look at the board, obviously, for not being able to move them on, for not being able to conjure some sort of interest or some sort of move away, and then to bring players in, to facilitate, in my opinion, a larger Ramazani exit when, uh, today, for instance, that would have helped, I feel. The board are at fault here. Of course they are. And I think they've backed Daniel Farke to a certain extent, but going forward, I don't think it's great. But I think that team is good enough today to beat Burnley. I think that squad is good enough today to beat Burnley. I do. And that's why I'm looking at Farke a little bit. And I'm looking at the players, because the players today, I think Burnley wanted it more than Leeds United today. Daniel Farke can't get on the pitch and can't put his boots on and start. You have to have Daniel Farke on the pitch. You have to have people who emit what Daniel Farke's aura is off the pitch, if he does have that aura off the pitch, to what it is on the pitch. You know what I mean? You've got to have those players. The team we hate, of course, Sir Alex Ferguson. When Roy Keane went on the pitch, he was Sir Alex Ferguson on the pitch. We've got to have some of those in our side. And I thought today there was players hiding from doing the brave things. I thought there was just a lack of urgency at points, and you take the game into your own hands at stages as well. I think to myself, like when you're absolutely allergic to playing long balls at any point in the game, you're allergic to the basics, the sloppiness in that first half. It was awful. Couldn't keep hold of the ball. Anyway, let's get into a few of your comments. Let's have a look. Ben says we're going down, aren't we? It's a hideous display, mate. People were not happy with me pre-game saying it was a must-win. Not happy at all. As I said in the game, and as I've said outside of the game as well, I'm trying to say that Leeds need 10 wins. Burnley away was one of those wins. We've got to pick up that win from somewhere else now. And I think it puts a lot of pressure on West Ham. Because if we were to lose against West Ham, by the way, West Ham will beat us on that showing today. They will beat us on that showing today. So if you lose to West Ham, you've then got to go away to Nottingham Forest and Brighton. 2 away games in the Premier League, which is never easy. But then you've got to do that. That's why this game was so important for me. Context right now and context overarching when you're looking at the season, 10 wins. I thought one of those wins, and we all thought that. I don't know why it's changed now. It's because the pressure's high and people don't like that pressure aspect. They don't want that. So the term must wins, it upsets people. People don't like that. But really, at the beginning of the season, Daniel Farke would have looked at Turf Moor, he'd have looked at Burnley, he'd looked at that Scott Parker outfit and gone, that's a win we have to target. 100%. Loft says, didn't spend enough. Simple, look at Sunderland. I will say when you look at Sunderland had a lot more to do than we did, mate. A lot more to do. And they had to make up that 24-point gap that we finished above them. Gabriel says, will our board have the balls and sack Farke? 30 million spent on a defender and a goalie, and their bench cannot win with a championship team. Yeah, I mean, the be all thing's bizarre. It's bizarre. And it's not like he's rusty either. It looks like when he's going away international duty-wise, he's doing well. Like you know what I mean? He's by what you're reading, of which I do on this news sphere all the time, every day. And we're bringing you guys a little bit of Leeds United news. from what you read, he's doing really well on the international stage. As I say, I thought when we brought Beal in, and I thought when we kept hold of Pascal Strout, Leeds at points, we're going to go to a back three. Doesn't appear that we're seeing that. Big Stack Meal said at halftime, this will finish 1 or 2-0 to Burnley because we're not creating anything at all. Kind of all the possession without cutting edge shambles. Echo Realm says, Hubble, Bubble, Toil and Trouble. Farker versus Bubble, oh dear, not good leads. Stevie says, after watching that shit, you deserve a drink. Sorry for that bad language, brother. No problem, Stevie. Good to see you in here today, mate, as well. JM the Goose says, we were abysmal today. I've never been so bored watching us play. The Jan window looks pretty important now. Rant over, on to the next one, marching on together. Yeah, I'm kind of that, mate. I mean, we knew anyway that there had to be some form of January installment at Leeds United when it comes to players. They've got to do something. They've got to do something. And look, the old Okafor thing, when we bought Okafor, and this is when I was talking about the physical readiness when Okafor came in. Okafor's barely played minutes for Napoli in the second half of the season. You know, AC Milan was a little bit inconsistent. You know, 1 goal in 15 there. Okafor has been improving week on week, but we know there's an injury record there with no Okafor. There's an injury record with Dominic Calvert-Lewin. There's an injury record with Lucas Mecha. You know, we know this when we're bringing these sorts of players in. So there is a bargaining chip on these players. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, if he's not got that injury record, he's probably moving to a top-ish club, believe it or not, especially with the clubs that were in for him when it comes to Newcastle and Man United on short-term contracts in the summer, which they were. So yeah, it's you're kind of looking at it and you're thinking Leeds have got to go and do something. We've got to go and bring 2 or 3 in, I think. You know, will we do that? I don't know. This board, yeah, it's a little bit up in the air, isn't it? It's a little bit up in the air. I think there's faults when it comes to them, 100%. I do, I do think, however, when you're looking at Farker, I think there's faults when it comes to Farker, and I think there's consistent things of which he does, which is repeated. And I don't think he's got that strain of adaptability in his managerial locker. That's my personal opinion. People don't like that. It's not a popular opinion, but that's what I feel. And I think there was a way to shape up today. And I think he went for, if I'm honest with you, I think he went for like the obvious option, which everybody could have predicted was not going to have any sort of productivity in front of goal. That's how I thought. Stevie says, Connor, Farker in or go. I'm leaning, get him gone. Samuel says, I've always been a Farker out as soon as promotion was secured. We needed to upgrade. His tactics are predictable. Do you think we get a new manager in before Jan? No, I don't think so, mate. I think it's been pretty obvious. I think it's pretty obvious that they're going to keep hold of Farker. I think they'll keep hold of him until the end of the season. I'd be stunned if they got rid of Daniel Farker. I'd be stunned. I think how Leeds will see it is, you know, there's a level of which that might be a little bit of an overreaction. I know people get annoyed. And let me explain this, because when I say an overreaction, I don't mean that your opinion isn't valued. What I'm saying is, I think the whole Farker out thing. I think the whole premise with Farker was that when he got to the Premier League, they wanted to see him prove himself in the Premier League. I think that goes on till the end of the season, personally. And that goes on till the end of the season. I think they probably got a little bit feared off when they slipped a little bit to Mike Keegan at the Daily Mail in the summer, and Leeds fans were absolutely narked off at Farker potentially being replaced at Leeds United with the 3 shortlisted options that we had. And I think that's probably scared them into submission to a certain level. And they probably think as well, like, if we were to go down, Farker brings us straight back up, of which a lot of people were saying with Bielsa. You know, if we'd have gone down, Bielsa would have brought us straight back up. So that's hindsight. Have they learned from that? Because they were in the boardroom when Orta and Radrizzani did that. Have they learned from that? Are they thinking really long term when it comes to Daniel Farker? I don't think they'll get rid of Farker this season. I don't think that will happen. Yeah, I don't think that will happen. Let's have a look at what you guys are saying as well. Matty says, this result doesn't define our season, though. I'm not saying it does define our season, Matty, but you can't tell me that at the beginning of the proceedings today, you'd have taken a 2-0 loss. Matty, it's a very cliched comment, that one, in my opinion. It's, you know, I think when you look at this game, I think a lot of us were saying must wins. I think then the next half of us were saying must not lose. You've lost, and I thought it was relatively comfortable for Burnley today. Defending the box 6 yard pretty easily. A lot of the balls into the box, hit the first man. I thought Leeds came out of the shell a little bit when Burnley retreated into a low block. That's when I thought Leeds had a little bit more time on the ball to conjure things, but that's what Burnley wanted. You just have the ball, we'll defend our area. But this result doesn't define our season. It doesn't. But then I think you've got to get something against West Ham. You've then got to follow that up, I think, with something at Forest. That's what I think you've got to do now. So, okay. But, you play like that against West Ham, you lose. You play like that against Forest, you lose. So, obviously, there will be players back, which will be context, which will improve Leeds 100%. But you have got to chalk this one off 100%. You've got to dust yourself down. And you have got to believe that to a certain level, Matty. You've got to believe that to a certain level. Otherwise, we might as well just relegate ourselves now. It doesn't define our season. But it was poor. I thought it was poorly managed. And the worry is how, in my opinion anyway, I thought they were a little bit more up for it than we were. From the off. That's a slight worry for me. Tim says, I'm with you, Connor. We're too predictable for Farke, outfoxed again. It could define our season. 2 back-to-back defeats can be a slippery slope in the Premier League. I think that's how it turns as well. It turns so quickly, doesn't it? Ampadu, Harrison, Aronson, DCL, all championship level. Easiest 3 points Burnley will get this season. Yeah. And it should have been the other way around, shouldn't it, James? It should have been the other way around. But I'd agree with that. As I said, I don't think it was difficult for Burnley today. A couple of missed chances by Leeds, 100%. Look at that Metro when you look at the Aronson, big one, of course. You look at the goals in particular. The second goal, I mentioned this during the stream, and maybe a few people weren't happy with what I said. Just letting him get the ball and strike it. And it was symptomatic of us today. It was symbolic, I should say. Symbolic of Leeds today. You go out for that first goal, engage with Kyle Walker. You kind of leisurely get out to him. Bearing in mind, he's some would still categorize him as a top-class right-back. He looked like that today, so we let him be like that. Getting the ball, delivering it. Had all the time in the world. Put a bib on. Have a little bit of food to have as well. A little bit down. Take the bib off. Then cross the ball. Have a cup of tea afterwards as well. A little lie down. Then cross the ball. Leeds actually have time to shape up because Kyle Walker spent, 2 touches getting the ball out of his feet to then deliver a ball like that. Leeds have got time to get themselves into shape, really aggressively defend that 6-yard box. Oh, hold on. There's a guy in between us. 2 centre-backs. Who's that then? Oh, he scored. Oh, well, better look next time. And then the second goal again, absolute worldy goal. Unbelievable. But where's the engagement? And I mentioned it was Strout because that's where the highlight reel stopped on the screen. Strout just almost looking at him. We know we've spoken nth amount of times about Strout going and engaging quicker instead of jockeying and waiting to then engage. But sometimes it's just got to be the first touch, then you go. Not first, second, third, then I'll go. Okay? But Ampadu again. So the Leeds players, when the lad got the ball on the edge of the box, they weren't absolutely dying to get in front of that ball. They weren't. It was kind of go, turn your back a little bit. And it's pathetic. Pathetic. He's about to shoot. You can see him shaping up. So all he could have done at that point. And Leeds, he's got 5 yards in front of him. There is no way you should have 5 yards in front of him. You go and you hit him. Or get in front of it as much as you can. Leeds players just sluggishly got to it, then turned the backs. It was shite defending for both goals. That's a problem. That is a problem. The pathetic, lackluster defending for both goals. Worldy goal, but get out to him. Get out to him. They didn't do that. Kirsch says, Darlow kicking it out of play didn't help. Kirsch, true, but then you've got Jack Harrison who can close the ball down. You've got Jack Harrison 2v1'd, which is a problem in itself. Kyle Walker being able to take as long as possible to put the ball into the box. And then Ugachukwu stood by himself. There's phases, mate. Okay, Kyle Darlow shanks it. Could Leeds not defend the box up to that point then? Could we not defend? After that point, is that just, it might as well be a goal now because Darlow shanked it. You've got to be able to defend that, mate. 100%. Yeah, Jason Darlow. Yeah, maybe he could have done better. I'm going to have a look again. Deck says, like the live people, 1.1k in here. Yeah, guys, do us a favor. Kelvin says, effing have it, you. Yep, thanks, mate. Kelvin is a fan of the channel, so I'm not gonna go in on him. But yeah, yeah. I think Tanaka had to start today. I think we mentioned it in the preview when it comes to an orchestrator, a dictator of play against the Burnley side. You can have the athleticism, the physicality, the blood and thunder, which we love at Ellen Road, and the big tackles, and you have the enforcement across the pitch. But then you need a difference maker in there. And the best player, technically, in this Leeds United side, especially when it comes to that passing ability, is Al Tanaka. You get him in with a blend of physicality and athleticism, get Tanaka on the ball from moment one, it starts to tick a little bit, you know? Tanaka is a deep line playmaker, in my opinion. In my opinion. And also, at this moment in time, what we have to bear in mind as well, everybody, is we are utilizing Anton Stack as a number 8. He's a 6. He's a 6. So can we vary that as well? You know? Can we have a little bit of moving parts? You know? Can you have maybe Stack dropping off into the number 6 at points, and Purdue press going a little bit higher into that number 8? You know, can you have Tanaka in an advanced number 8 role, which we don't see enough of? It's always Tanaka coming on and almost being that sweeper just between the centre backs. Why don't we have Stack doing that from a deep lying position and just vary it a little bit? Vary a little bit in that midfield, not being so predictable. You know, could we see a little bit more from Stack in terms of those threaded balls through from a deeper position? Because I can tell you for a fact, playing in the number 6 and the number 8 is a completely different outlook. I've done it myself plenty of times. Playing in the number 8 is completely different to playing in the 6. Could we see a better Anton Stack in the number 6 where he's played for Hoffenheim in Germany? Potentially. But we're not utilising that. We're not varying it. But I do miss Tanaka at this moment in time. Have to say. Johnny Cooper's put, we'll get this on screen as well. You guys might be interested in this one. Hold on a sec. This will be interesting for you to see. When it comes to Johnny Cooper, obviously brilliant stat guy when it comes to Leeds. Johnny's just put this on. So a pretty failed ploy by Leeds today. Get the ball into the box. This was the most crosses by a team in the Premier League game this season, 47. And most by Leeds in a league game for over 5 years. Bearing in mind the context for this as well is what were the crosses like into the box? You know, where was the when the ball was into the box and there was initial contact from Burnley, which the majority of the time there was initial contact by Burnley. Where was the second contact by Leeds or the third contact by Leeds? There wasn't, was there? So we're putting 47 balls into the box. I count maybe Metcha over the bar. Metcha header on goal. I can't think of anything. That is shocking. 47 crosses. How many of them were good crosses? That's the context for me. But how do we find a positive here? Can I say something as well? Can I say something as well? You know when we're talking about, and I'll get on to Stevie's super chats in a sec. You know when we're talking, guys, about Daniel being the fall guy. I don't want to go on this too much, right? As I've said at the very beginning, you've got the ability on the bench to go 3 at the back and push very productive wing backs further up the pitch. You don't need to worry about Harrison and Aronson. You don't need to worry about it. Level of pragmatism. Put 3 at the back, 2 in the middle. Let's have Stack in a 6th position. Stack in a 6th position. And Purdue next to him. Let's match up against Uga Chukwu and Florentino Luis in there. And let's have Tanaka pressing a little bit further forward on Cullen in that defensive role, of which Tanaka's a much better technical footballer than Cullen. There might be a little bit more joy there. Not Tanaka in a deep line playmaker role. Put Stack in his original position in a number 6 next to Ampadu, if you want. Put Tanaka a little bit further up. You've got that cover there with 2 6s. Tanaka a little bit further up, and then put Peru, Metcha, or Metcha, DCL, or DCL Peru. You've got options. This is why I'm not taking it away from the gaffer. No way. Change of system. You don't have to play Tom and Jerry on either side. You don't have to play Laurel and Hardy on either side. You have to do it. Change the system. But for some reason, there's a rhetoric amongst a lot of Leeds fans. How can you expect him to do that? What do you mean? Isn't he earning a massive amount of money as a Premier League manager? Can he not change systems? Can we not do that for the better of Leeds United? Can that not happen? It's staggering to me, staggering. And I always mention Thomas Frank because there is a level of which Leeds are trying to replicate, in my opinion, what Brentford have done. Thomas Frank came out in an interview at Brentford and said, we focus on physicality, getting a certain height and depth of player, which is what he said in his interview. He also said that it's all about winning your 50-50s. And he said, being strong defensively, defending that edge of the box and hitting teams on counterattacks. For me, it's evident that Leeds have tried to follow that blueprint this season. I think personally, I think because Thomas Frank is he's a bit of a. I think he's very articulate. I think he's followed the blueprint of the Premier League as well. But the reason I mention Frank is because he's got two different strands. When Brentford play against a team who they think they can beat, and Brentford play against a team who they think they might not beat, but they might nick something off Arsenal, Man United, Man City. 3-5-2 and a 4-3-3. Why can we not emulate that? Is it beyond the realms of possibility for a manager to have that in his back pocket? I don't think it should be in 2025 when how important systems are and the lack of importance there is on individual quality and these mavericks in the game nowadays. It's all about system-based production. Dan, it's the most dense comment you ever hear, mate. It's the most dense comment. Like, stuff like this. Do you know what I mean? In here, we've got an extremely intelligent community. We've all spoken about the ownership. We've spoken about the game state in itself in terms of the players. And we've also spoken about the manager. We've split it up. But for Leeds United to win the game today, I think ultimately it was dependent on the player endeavour, of which I thought was pretty low to start off with, to be honest. It looked like Burnley wanted it more. And that's a huge value, of course it is. But then I think systems, you don't have to rely on the worst players in the Leeds United squad, in Brendan Aronson and Jack Harrison. You don't have to rely on them. Take them out of it. Have another system in your back pocket. Dan, they're the same formation. They're effectively the same formation. You have three at the back, Dan. And for me, that is where you can involve the guy we've brought for 20 million quid and who was one of the Euro 2024 stars and who was up there when it came to clearances on the edge of his box last season, clearances in general in Europe. I mean, we could have done with that today, couldn't we? We could have done with that today with Ugachuk, who just stood there by himself. You have three at the back. We've mentioned this several times. There's a systematic difference, and you don't have to rely on Aronson and Harrison. It tells me, Dan, that you can't be balanced with it, mate. You can't be balanced with it. It's the FDL, the Farker Defence League. Okay? We can pick holes on Farker. We can pick holes on players. We can pick holes on the board. We try and make it even here. We do. Okay? There's a grey area. It's not just black and white. But for goodness sake, there is definitely a systematic change of which you could put in against Burnley at Turf Moor with the greatest respect. We've also played 3-4-3 before, but we never seem to use it. And I don't know why, especially with Beal on the side. Okay, let's get into some of your comments. Let's go. Stevie says, if the 49ers don't have Bottle, we're championship next season, Farker needs to be gone. Stevie also says, what do you think about Mel Aben on the bench? Perry was fit enough. I don't know, mate. It doesn't look like he was fit enough. Yeah, I mean, 4-3-3, 3-4-3, you just have to have four central players. You ideally want it to be complete. A 3-4-3, I think you're kind of probably more looking at a 3-5-2. That's what I think you're kind of looking at, with a little bit of variance in that midfield. Okay. I personally thought Burnley were poor today and won't win many games. Well, fair enough, mate. Fair enough. We had a bad day, but we move on. And Paul, hope you're right, mate. And let's hope you are bang on, mate. Let's hope you bang on. Right. We're going to leave it there. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, everybody. Let us know in the comment section below all these sort of bits. We're doing the ups and downs episode tomorrow, which will be on your feeds at around about 10 o'clock. Thank you so much. Let's hope for better days around the corner. My name's Conor McGilligan. This is One League.